Hello and welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melenda, and I am excited to invite you all tonight to join us here as we take a look at a special game, a very special game. Ars Magica, or is it Ars Magica? Let me know with your super chats and tips. There was a lot of debate in the Night's Last Call Patreon about whether or not this is the correct way to pronounce this. Let us quickly give a shout out to all of our friends and close ones and loved ones here in the chat. We got Golda Cat is in the chat. Hello. I am not appeasing Ryan with this one. I am appeasing Beowulf. Ryan will get his dues next week. Yes, Pumpkin's got it correct. Welcome Al Rayan. Welcome C Cav. Welcome El Soli or Solil. It's French, I think. I don't know. Sidon, hello. Heavy Metal Mystic, howdy to yourself. Rule of Cool with the best avatar ever. Can't believe you're still rocking that, by the way. Thank you. Janka, welcome. Pepper, hello, hello. Frosty, a fond good evening to you as well. What is up, Thunder Mammoth? Hello. Toyoyo is here. Henry is here. Hello, hello. Ken and Zerverus. Hello, everybody. And the doctor's in. Game got canceled. Hanging out with us tonight. Well, that's great to hear. Real quick, shout out to Shadram, who just re-upped their 14 months of supporting the adventure and being a member of our Night's Last Call YouTube channel, in addition to being a member of our Night's Last Call Patreon. And Yush is here. Hello, folks. Finally catching one from the beginning. Yes, we are starting from the beginning. J-Jax, what is up, Derek? What is up? Let's see. Well, I'm on vacation for the next week. Basically had my last set of meetings yesterday, finished up my work for the year, essentially, today. So I'm basically off tomorrow. I'm off, obviously, next week. For Monday, and then I'm off the rest of that week. I have a couple things I have to do. And of course, if you're not aware, this incredible, amazing channel supported us with a tip goal, and we are going to be streaming every day next week. So I'm going to be streaming Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm going to try to throw in some midday streams in there as well, just to kind of break it up and maybe give some other people some opportunities to join the stream. We might even have a guest or two. So, you know, we'll see what we can set up. So feeling pretty good because, like I said, work is done and I get to kind of relax and I get to hang out with you all and we get to talk obscure tabletop role-playing games. And that is what we are here for. Gurney, hello. Hello to you as well. That has been on the docket to do a part 2 with Ayla to come back onto the stream and do a part 2. Oh, I knew it was for the sun, but I'm just not much of a Francais speaker. What is it? Je ne parle français. Is that how you say it? I think je ne parle. I took Spanish. Anyways, welcome everybody. So tonight, as most of our streams go, we are basically doing what my Patreon wants me to do. And this system is something that I had mentioned a while ago. We'll talk about how we kind of arrived or how I came into this channel system a little bit. Okay. Je ne parle pas. Je ne parle pas. Sounds kind of, that's not how I would have said it, but that's because I don't speak French. I was close. Okay. I've actually been to France. I've been to Paris, and I've been to up and down the Normandy coast. I went there in high school as part of a big senior trip thing with the foreign language department. And it was really, really cool for me because I was super, super into World War II. So I got to go and I got to tour the battlefields in Normandy. I got to walk on Omaha and Utah Beach. I got to go to the harbor at Arromanches. I got to go to the American Cemetery there in Normandy as well. Very, very cool trip. and I loved Paris. I thought it was a beautiful city, and it was fantastic. And you know, I did the whole. I kissed a girl on top of the Eiffel Tower. It was like a movie. It was awesome. Anyways, so what was I saying? Oh yes. So Ars Magica or Ars Magica. You know what? Whichever one has the most tips tonight, I'll pronounce it that way. Is a game that was actually released hard to believe. The first edition was released in 1987, and it was created by Mark Rein-Hagen and Jonathan Tweet. Now, Jonathan Tweet, in particular, would go on to make a number of significant contributions to the role-playing game industry, Everway being a big one of them. But he also was the lead designer for 3rd edition D&D. And, say what you will, I think most modern gaming, whether you play 5th edition D&D or whether you will play Pathfinder 2nd edition or certainly Pathfinder 1st edition, there's a lot. Basically, anything in the modern D20 space comes from 3E D&D. And so Jonathan Tweet, I think, in a way, maybe, aside from maybe like Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, might it be the single greatest influence on the way that most people play role-playing games today. So Ars Magica was his first go at it, one of his earliest projects. Now, I did not play this game in the 80s. I was a young man, very young. And I didn't play it in the 90s either. I didn't learn about this game until the 2000s after 3rd edition D&D came out, and I was interested in Jonathan Tweet's work. And I took a look at this, and I ended up finding a copy. I want to say it was probably 3rd edition at a half-price bookstore, and I couldn't actually find it. I tried to find it for tonight's stream. But for tonight, so this is why it's kind of like a first look, but also sort of a retrospective, because I have read this game before. I've looked through it before, and I remember being very intrigued by a lot of the ideas because, and again, we'll get into this as much as we want to, because it really spoke to me about the magic. This game is all about magic. And so tonight we are going to be working with the 5th edition. This is the latest edition of Ars Magica, and it came out, I think, in 2004. So even ironically, everything gets to 5th edition. But even though it's the latest edition, it's almost 20 years old. So we are going to be working off the 5th edition tonight. That's what I've got my PDF for. My buddy Rich is in the chat here, who just bought Dungeon Alchemist. Sweet. Dungeon Alchemist is very, very, very cool. I have not played around with it, but I think Smith has. Smith definitely has. I just haven't played it. I want to roll on to session for that kiss. No, it was great. Anna Raguse, she was a junior. I was a senior. Kind of had like a whirlwind romance while we were on the trip. It was pretty great. We tried dating when we got back to home. It just didn't work out. Let's see here. Oh, yes, Call of Cthulhu did get to 7th. I'm just saying everything seems to be, everything nowadays seems to just be at 5th edition. So let's talk a little bit about why this game really spoke to me. There's a couple of different things. I'm going to avoid trying to go to the whiteboard. We will, don't get me wrong. We've got the PDF pulled up. We're going to go to it. So the main thing is in the late 90s, okay, a game came out, which I have referenced on this channel before. Hold on a second, let me grab it. A game came out in the late 90s, which was called the Dragonlance 5th Age Dramatic Adventure Game. And this used the Saga rules system. They actually made a Marvel superhero game that used the Saga rules system as well. And this game was, didn't use dice. It was really weird, right? And it was set in the world of Dragonlance in the 5th Age, the Age of Mortals. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to focus on is the spell casting from this Dragonlance 5th Age product. And the way that in this version of Kryn worked is, again, we're going to go off a little bit on a tangent here, but in the prior version, in the prior ages of Krynn, you know, the stuff from the Dragonlance novels and pretty much everything that everybody knows, you had the schools of the Towers of High Sorcery, the schools of high sorcery. You have the orders. You had the Black Order, the white robes, the black robes, the red robes, right? You had the three gods or goddesses of magic, Solinari, Luminari, and Nuitari. And they basically had traditional, what we would call Vancian spell casting, right? Fireball, lightning bolt, Tensor's floating disc, you know, memorize a spell, cast a spell. But when the Age of Mortals came, the gods were destroyed. They left the world. So there was no more gods, which meant in Krynn meant that there was no more magic, at least magic as we knew it. In the Dragonlance 5th Age game, you had a type of magic that was called sorcery. And this was contrasted with the older version, the sort of slot-based Vancian system that we know and love that was called wizardry. Sorcery was a raw magic. It was the primal magic. It was the original magic. And again, this is us in high school. This is like, you know, I grew up playing D&D. I had been taught D&D. I had been exposed. I was starting to get exposed to other games. I think I had discovered Earth Dawn probably around the same time. But we had been D&D players, basic, first edition, and then boom, into second edition. And that was our go-to, right? So, but even then, I grew up reading books like The Hobbit, but also books like A Wizard of Earthsea, and more so than even The Hobbit. The Wizard of Earthsea, you know, Ged and the, you know, Ogion and all the stuff from that book, and of course the whole Earthsea cycle was really, really, really impactful to me. And in these books, magic felt so much more. And I didn't really read Jack Vance. I didn't read the Dying Earth series or saga. You know, my only real exposure to quote unquote D&D style magic was through like the books of R.A. Salvatore, the Dritz books. So, and some of the other Forgotten Realms kind of books. So I didn't really, I didn't really jam it. It didn't fit my vibe of magic. So when this game came out, my friends and I started playing it. And the way that magic worked in this system was there were 8 disciplines of sorcery. If you were like a master, you knew 3 of the 8. And if you were a neophyte or an acolyte or an initiate, you knew 1. And they were basically like aeromancy, control of the air, geomancy, control of the earth, pyromancy, control of fire. You get the idea. And there were no spells. Instead, there was a chart in the book. It had 5 different tables. And the first table was the casting time. The second table was the range. The third table was the duration. The fourth table was the area of effect. And the fifth table, the most complicated table, was like the effect, right? How big of an effect was it? How much damage did it do? You made every spell from scratch when you cast it. It was a unique sort of, the only qualification is it had to be thematically tied to whatever it is. So if I had pyromancy and I wanted to, you know, in a instant flash, you know, in a sudden flash, surround us with a protective barrier of fire, we would very quickly sort of say, okay, casting time, instant, duration, let's go with a minute, you know, effect, you know, maybe it's a moderate effect, it's a flaming wall, area effect, range is very close. It's not going far away from us. It's right next to us. Area of effect, you know, 4 to 6 people. And so really quickly you could be like, boom, 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 boom. And that would assess the numerical value of that spell, which told you how hard it was to capture it or to cast it. You know, the difficulty number, the DDC, if you will. And it also told you how many mana points it cost out of or sorcery points it cost out of your character's sorcery point pool. But this to me was like revolutionary because for the first time ever, people felt like the wizards that I grew up, you know, reading in these stories where magic was this sort of as much of an art as it is a science, right? There's sort of a mixture of both. And I just felt like that creativity was missing. And I can't speak for you and your groups, but I know that in theory, technically, spell research has always been a thing in D&D, but very few people I've ever played with, and I've been playing for a long time, have ever really gone down the line, a path of making their own spells. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I just never felt super magical to me. Hey, Janka with the super chat. So we are on to the Ars Magica, because again, Ars Magica, because that's what's winning right now. People who pronounce it like the tip goal probably pronounce GIF the wrong way. Which way is that? The way that makes you stray further from Jode. I pronounce it GIF, not GIF, but GIF. So, any case, this was a huge influence to me, and I fell in love with this way of casting spells. And then 3rd edition D&D came out, and this game got thrown out the window because 3rd edition D&D was fucking awesome, and that is all we played for a very long time. But in my heart, I was always kind of like, yeah, but I think I liked that spellcasting system better. And through, I started to go to Gen Con. I went to my very first Gen Con in 2001. So I started becoming more exposed, and I learned about this game called Ars Magica, or Ars Magica, but Ars Magica. And what I learned from it was, this is a crazy game that John Tweet, who created 3rd edition, made, and it uses this really, really cool way of doing magic. So that is the reason why I was sort of originally drawn to the game, and why I initially had read it and explored it many, many years ago, 20 years ago. Now, as I said before, there has subsequently been a 5th edition released. Granted, it came out like 2004, 2005 or something. So it's still pretty old. But tonight, we are going to take a look at Ars Magica, the art of magic. So before we dig into this, I do want to kind of create sort of a baseline expectation. In fact, you know what? Hold on a sec here. You guys know how it is. All right, we got the whiteboard. So and again, this is sort of my high level take on the game without having actually, really gotten into it yet. There we go. Okay. I was waiting for my welcome to connect. There it goes. Okay. So Ars Magica. What is like my high level sort of assessment of this game? Well, the first is, and this actually may be what, a lot of people, again, on this channel, we like to talk about GNS, and we talk about gamey games and simulationist games and narrative games. And we talk a lot about narrative gamist games like Fabula Ultima, games like maybe 13th Age a little bit. And we talk about gamist simulationist games. That might be your, your 3rd edition D&D, or your Pathfinder 2nd edition, or your Against the Dark Master. But there's always been this question of like, well, what is a narrativist simulationist game? I think it is this game. I want to say, and we'll go through it together, but to me, this is first and foremost the way that the same way that like Ars Magica, okay, is to wizards as L5R is to samurai. Okay. This is a complicated rule set that is designed to sort of simulate the life and times of being a wizard in a very exacting detail. And it covers all of the facets of a wizard's life. Like, for example, and this is where we talk about, right? Like, system matters. System is setting. We talk about that, mechanics, that are brought up, get mentioned. They get, what gets repeated gets reported. So, people are always surprised that Legend of the Five Rings, has rules in it, literal skills, rules for like flower arrangement and poetry, because those are things that are important to samurai. Ars Magica is a game that literally has like detailed mechanics about spending time in the library, because that is what a wizard does. In fact, there's a section we'll get to where it basically says adventuring isn't the main thing that you do. That it might come up and you might occasionally have to go and do some, wizard, some crazy adventuring task, but it's very, 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 it's not the normal thing that you're going to do. Right. So it's more like, I've always said, for years, people have said, like, I don't understand, why does a wizard need to go into the dungeon and kill goblins in order to get better at magic? Shouldn't he just stay at home in his library and study? This is that game. This is the game where the wizard who stays at home and studies in the library gets better at being a wizard. And in fact, it's vital to them. So the first thing is just this whole concept based around, being a wizard. The second bullet point, or the third bullet point that I want to bring up, is this idea, which we'll get into, of troop style play. And, I'm not a fan of the show. I've tried to watch the show, but I'm not a fan of it. The closest thing I could say to this game is this game feels like a little bit like it was designed around the concept of Doctor Who. Now, I'm not a Doctor Who expert, but let me tell you something. And you, those of you in the audience who might be Doctor Who fans, in this game, you have a stable of characters. Okay. As a player, at the table. I should note, everybody's a player at the table, and the GM, which I believe is called the storyteller or something like that, I think is the name of the GM role in this game. The game encourages you to maybe rotate the storytelling role around your table. So, you might be a storyteller for maybe a couple of seasons, and then another player plays as a storyteller. They're the GM. So each player, okay, is going to typically have one mage or one magus, right? And that is your character. That is, your wizard, the wizard. Okay. A main character nonetheless. So tier 1 of our characters are your magi, who are your spell casting badasses. But you will have more than one character, because you will have potentially, maybe 1 to 3 what are called companions. Now, this is where the game gets really interesting, because companions are, and your magus are mutually exclusive. You will almost never run your companion character at the same time that you are running your magus, and vice versa. And so likewise, you would not really run 2 companions. These are main characters. This one is, a little bit more main character because, they're the big bad wizard. But the idea is you make companions, but here's the deal. These are non-wizards, but they are still important people in the world, in the land. But here's the thing. They're not the companion of your magus. They're the companion of the other players' maguses or magi at the table, right? So let's say, for example, that Shadram had a really awesome fire mage type character. I might have a companion character who is a warrior, right? Who is sworn in eternal service to this fire mage, right? So obviously this character is still a main character, but he's not the big bad, wizard. So there might be instances and times, there might be extended periods of time where I play as this sort of, we'll call it a secondary character, but not in like the as much of a way. It's like it's clearly not the main character. And so in this way, you can have a variety of adventures, even though your main character may not always be present. And the reason I said this sounds like Doctor Who is it's my understanding that, right, Doctor Who is sort of the main character, but they always have they're surrounded by these people called companions, which journey with them on their adventures through time. But these are, again, main characters. These are main characters. And then we have legitimately supporting characters. And these are called grogs. And these are basically everyone else, right? So, like, these are red shirts, these are kind of throwaway characters. These aren't main characters. These are characters that are just, joining the session because it's appropriate for them to do so. So, for example, let's say that Shadram's Magus is going into an ancient forest in order to gather some sort of magical components. And Shadram, who's playing his Magus, brings along, I'm a player, I bring along my companion, his warrior companion. But then there's like there's like a guide, like a local woodsman, right? Who we hire to be like the guide. You would actually have a player play that, because you'd say, look, it doesn't make sense for any of your characters to be at this session. So you're going to play as the kind of expendable extra. And again, the book goes into detail about why it thinks that this is really cool. You may not think it's cool. In fact, I think this is, more than anything else, I think this is one of the biggest points of departure for a lot of people. Because I have met, over many, many years, so many people for whom RPGs are all about that sort of imagined cohabitation of mind and body with this one character, this one singular point of reference in the game. And it's like, you are one person and one person only. And the idea that you would have playing different characters is very, very strange for some people. I see this all the time. Mostly, it's an RPG, but not in like the technical sense, is Fiasco. In a game of Fiasco, you are all like making your main character. There's like no stats or anything. But when you create scenes, you might say, okay, in this scene, you're not in this scene, GM Scott, but in this scene, we need somebody to be the cashier. So you play the cashier. And then me and, Ayla or whatever, we're going back and forth as our main characters, getting into an argument in the middle of this convenience store. And your character GM Scott is playing as the cashier, not as his main character, the one that actually matters. It's just that, it's inconvenient. It's not realistic that every main character would be in every single scene, but people still want to play the game. So you create this system to sort of fill in the space. So this troop style play is, I think, really, really, really interesting. And I think is going to be one of the biggest points of departure for quite a few people. Then the last thing, or the last element of it, is what they call the sagas. And this is basically their word for a campaign. But there's a implicit understanding in this. You gain, okay, and I'll just say time. This game is designed to take place over a long period of time. In fact, you gain XP every season, right? Every 3 months, that is when you check to see how much experience points your character earned. So if you were playing in your typical kind of D20 style game, which in my experience, a lot of times, especially nowadays with adventure paths, you might go 1 to 20, the whole dang adventure takes place in 3 months, 6 months in game time, right? In game time. In this game, you would literally get XP twice. Your characters would essentially have progressed nothing, right? It's not like, because you get so much XP. And no. It's like, you could play for 12, 14, 15, 16 sessions. And if that all takes place within a single season, you're not doing anything. You're not getting anywhere. So this game is designed to go on. And so there's almost kind of a Pendragon-esque a nature to this, where there's this idea of, it's not just about you, okay? It's about your legacy. It's about the world around you. It's about things taking time and, potentially even kind of bringing up a sort of generational play to the surprise of nobody. Wizards tend to, maguses tend to live a long time, longer than a normal human. So, throughout the course of an entire campaign, you could have your companions dying off, right? Certainly your grogs dying off, the world around you changing because your magus, is going to live for, many countless decades, if not centuries. And this is also highlighted in the game where magic and aging affects you. There is a score called the deprecated score, right? It's basically how worn down are you by the passage of time? Like how decrepit, that's it, decrepit. How decrepit is your character? And this score will show you like, yeah, you are old. You are really old, okay? So it's kind of interesting. Time is a really big part of this game's character. And then there's the last thing, which is it has a very sort of free-form magic system, which again is what really initially brought me into this system. So we're not going to be able to cover everything because, it is what it is. But I think if we can kind of talk about some of these main points, I think we will have been successful. And of course, as always, if you have any comments or thoughts or questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. If you put it in a tip or super chat, it will guarantee that I will see it, especially when we do these PDF streams. I'm sorry, sometimes I do miss some of the chat because I'm going on for a while and you guys are all carrying on having your awesome conversations, and I just don't get to follow along as closely as I normally do. Does it suffer from the 10-minute adventuring season? It's my understanding actually that you might as a group be like, hey, you know what? Let's have 2 years pass. Does that work for everybody? Does 2 years pass? 2 years passing work for everybody? Okay, great. So we'll pick back up 2 years from now, which I think is really, really cool. All right. So Ars Magica. So we talked about some of the basic distinctions or the basic differences. And I will say this before we get any further. The initial art kind of has that Pendragon feel to it, right? There's kind of that almost like medievalist element to it. Oh, I forgot to mention that as well. The last point, the last thing to sort of be aware of is that the world is 1200s, what they call, I think they call it Mythic Europe. It is medieval Europe, but with magic. If magic was really rare, but was real. But other than that, it is like medieval Europe. So that is the other thing to consider about this game. So what I was gonna say is, it starts off with this kind of Pendragon-esque, kind of looks like medieval art. But some of the art in this game is what I'm going to call rough. Okay? Rough. This is a rough piece of art. Look, call me. I'll take, if I ordered art and I got this piece of art, I would tell the artist, I'd be like, my guy, please use Midjourney. Please. I'd rather you give me AI art than whatever this is. So the art is for me very miss. I was gonna say hit or miss. It's mostly miss. Art is not good. So anyways, this is horrible. All right. So I just want to get that out of the way first. So let's talk core mechanic of Ars Magica. And that is the stress die. Okay. It's a simple D10 10-sided die. Interestingly, this game is old enough that, that nowadays, I still think that most D10s are labeled 0 through 9, but I have seen modern D10s that are labeled 1 through 10, since the 0 usually counts for 10. But in this case, you're rolling a D10, and in this case, the 0 does actually mean 0. And so, simply put, you're going to roll a D10, and then you're going to add it to, basically, you're going to add it to your character's characteristic, which is basically an ability score. And then you're going to add also your ability, which is confusing, which is basically your skills. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? Common language, and when people change things up, it's a little bit confusing. So in this game, ability scores are called characteristics, and skill ranks are called abilities. So if my ability or my characteristic was a 2, and my skill or my ability was a 2, I would be adding +4 to a single D10 roll. So what happens when we roll? Well, if we roll 2 through 9, then the die result is whatever shows on the die. All right. So if I roll an 8, my bonus is 4, I got a 12. What if I roll a 1? Well, then you re-roll and you double the result. In this case, zeros count as 10. So if we roll a 1, we re-roll, we ignore the 1, we re-roll, and if we get a 2, it's actually a 4. If we get a 6, it's actually a 12. If we get a 10, it's actually a 20. But what if we roll 1 again? Well, then we roll it again, and now it's quadrupled. What if we roll a 1 again? You roll again, and it's times 8. And I like the way that they even address this in the game. They say, if a player rolls 10 consecutive 1s in a row, the number rolled on the 11th throw would be multiplied by 1,024. Stress die totals in the hundreds are likely to happen a handful of times in a long-running saga. So I just like the idea of these like unbounded, unbelievable critical hits, because it doubles each time. It just keeps doubling. It's not linear, right? This is geometric growth. And so the idea that like someone could just, it is a very rare event, 1 in 1,000. But over the course of a very long lasting campaign, someone would be like, do you remember that time that you got 400 on your result? In a game where normally the results are going to be like 10 to, 5 to 15. And your character gets like a 500, right? And that's like one of those, like, you cast a fire spell and you wipe out the entire enemy army in one spray. It's just like this unbelievable moment. I think that's kind of cool. I understand that it's very rare, but it is kind of a cool thing. If you roll a 0, you check for what's called a botch. So again, one of the things that they talk, this is kind of interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Blades in the Dark, position and effect, because I'm going to scroll down here. Here are what, again, this game was created in 1987, give it something. This is before DC did not exist. DC didn't exist until 2000. These are called ease factors. These are DCs. So this is what you need to roll on that D10 plus your bonuses in order to succeed. And of course, this is something that is in the control of the game master or the storyteller. Note, remember, as I said before, this game, in my opinion, is simulationist, highly simulationist, and even a little bit narrativist. It is very not gamist. And one of the reasons it is not gamist is because there's almost nothing in this game that talks about balance or levels, or like the game doesn't really even have levels in a sense. If you, in a season, if you spend time researching stuff in a library, you might get more knowledge skills. Like the game is fairly diegetic. But the ease factors basically tell you what you need to roll. So you can see that a 0 is, basically not really worth rolling for. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24. Now, what's interesting about this is they actually give you 2 levers. So the ease factor tells you basically like how difficult is this task. But when you have a check the GM also has to decide how many botch dice that check has. Because remember, as I said before, when you roll a 0 on your D10, you have to check for a botch. So a 0 basically means you rolled like shit. Does it go bad? Right? Think of it as critical fumble. But what's interesting here is the danger or the risk is different from how hard the task is. Like, for example, I don't know, I'm going to go craft Excalibur, right? That might be a really fucking hard check, right? Requiring a 21 or a 24. So we want to roll because it's difficult and we want to see if our character can actually do it. But what's going to go wrong if I'm forging Excalibur, right? Like I don't know. I didn't do it, so I got to do it next. Maybe I didn't do it this season. I have to wait till the summer to try again. So in that case, you're only going to roll 1 botch die. But if the thing that you're doing has a lot of risk involved, then you're going to roll more botch dice. So what happens is on that main die roll, which is only a D10, if you roll a 0, you then would take a number of D10 equal to the botch dice and roll all of them. And at this point, each 0 that you roll is your ass, like up the line. So to the point where if a character rolls like 3 zeros on their botch dice, right, all hell has broken loose. So to give an example, if we were, let's say, climbing a crumbling cliff in the wind, and the GM said, okay, the difficulty or the ease factor is 12. I think this is hard, but it's a treacherous set of conditions, and the risk here is really, really tough. I'm going to give this 3 botch dice. A character who rolls a 0, I would say, okay, you got to check for botch. They would then take those 3d10, roll them, and if they didn't roll any 0s, great. I mean, they failed, but it wasn't like a catastrophe. But if that character rolled a 1-0, maybe they started climbing up and their rope snaps. Maybe they roll 2 zeros, they're right near the top, and that's when the cliff face gives way and they start to fall down to their death. If they roll 3 zeros, maybe they cause an avalanche and the entire freaking mountainside begins to slide down the mountain. My point is, there's sort of a fun way to sort of give you levers for both how hard something is versus how risky something is. And I think that that's kind of a cool, interesting way of doing it. So I thought that was pretty cool. But that's the main mechanic of the game, right? Right here, these two things. Is roll a die, D10, add your bonuses, and then you got to beat the factor that the GM has assessed. Okay. This game has a very deep lore. I think there's several hundred books that have been made for this game. I'm not over the many editions. It has built out its entire world of this mythic Europe. Okay. And as a result, there is a lot of internal lore to this game. To the long story short, wizards, maguses, are people born with the gift and have been trained and instructed in its use. However, the gift has a very problematic side effect. When you have the gift, it creates a natural antipathy in other people. So when you are capable of casting magic, basically, people don't like you. They don't know why. They don't know. It's not like they can point to anything and say, this person's a jerk. They just act like you are, okay? Including other mages. And this meant that like wizards could never work together because if exactly, Viking. Yeah, the gift makes animals hate you, right? It's very classic stuff. If you've ever read The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper, when Will awakens to being an old one, right? Like all the animals are like afraid of him and stuff like that. It's this, I think, it's a similar idea. I don't know if this came out in 1987. Dark is Rising was written in the 70s. So maybe they took it from that. I don't know. Always reminded me of that. So any case, the gift has problems. Being magically endowed has problems. There's another issue. which is called corruption or something. Someone will point it out. But basically, when you use and live in magical areas, it can start to twist you and change you and begin to literally corrupt you. So magic is not only rare, it's dangerous. And as a wizard or as a magus, people basically kind of hate you. And so mages could never work together until this famous mage in Europe created a ritual called the Parma Magica. Okay? Parma meaning like shield. So it's like basically magic shield. So this is a ritual learned by all hermetic magi. By the way, all wizards in Mythic Europe belong to something called the Order of Hermes. You're all hermetic wizards. A ritual learned by all hermetic magi at the conclusion of their apprenticeship, which allows them to resist magic. So basically, this guy, this Bonsagius, created a ritual that allows mages to shield themselves from other mages' magic. But more important than that, when you're shielded like that, you don't get fucked over by the gift, which means that mages can actually work together. Because for the first time ever, they're not worried about getting blown away by the other wizard. And more importantly, it kind of shuts down that natural tendency for people to be envious and, a suspect of you. So now wizards, for the first time ever, could work together. And that led to the creation of these big wizard fraternal orders, which are called houses, I think. Maybe. Let's see here. The founders, the 12 magi who founded the Order of Hermes in the 8th century. Okay. And this is like where you kind of get into the Vampire the Masquerade kind of thing, because one of the houses, one of the founders is Tremere. So that's kind of where the Vampire the Masquerade tie-in is that is, House Tremere is in this game because they were one of the original creators of magic. And so again, lots of information about all of this, stuff here, and about the different houses and which house you belong to. And each house, of course, has, unique traditions and unique capabilities. This one here, Flambeau, House Flambeau. While most followers of Flambeau specialize in fire magic, some study spells of simple annihilation as a more subtle alternative. These aggressive and ferocious magi often cause trouble within the order and frequently anger mundanes. However, their fearlessness and love of destruction makes them invaluable when the order requires the application of martial force. It's basically what Harry Potter house are you, right? Tim, welcome. Glad to have you. Henry says there sounds like they're dabbling in alchemy. Viking says there's a source book for that. It doesn't surprise me. I think there's a source book for everything in this game. Alrea says literally the Order of Hermes lore is in Mage the Ascension. Okay, so there you go. So not only does it tie into it sounds like ties into the whole world of darkness. So that's really interesting. My understanding is that at some point in time, again, there's been 5 editions. It's currently owned by Atlas Games. And by the way, we have a link in the description below. It takes you over to DriveThruRPG. If you want to pick up this PDF that I'm looking through, that is an affiliate link. So we get a couple of percentage points. It doesn't cost anything to you, but just to let you know, we do get 3 or 4% of your sale given to us as a credit on our DriveThruRPG account, which allows us to buy all these PDFs that we do then to share with you all in these streams. So you have these different houses and they all have different traditions. And at first it's like, you might think, okay, so, this could be kind of a problem, right? Well, this is where the concept of the covenant comes in. And this is where the game really, really takes a turn. Okay. In fact, I'm going to read this verbatim because I think it's important. Covenants are as important to the Order of Hermes as houses, and magi can and do spend hours debating which is more important in the end. If you want to think of it this way, your house, okay, is like where you went to college. Your covenant is where you work. And there might be people from various, oh, they went to Carnegie Mellon. Oh, they went to, Loyola. Oh, they went to UC Berkeley, right? But you all work and you're all sort of, they're like, but we all have kind of the same goal, right? And so we're all going to live and work together as best as we can. It doesn't mean we're like BFFs forever. We're more like professional coworkers, right? We have a degree of professionalism amongst us. So this is called the covenant. Strictly speaking, a covenant is any group of magi who agree to a set of rules that go beyond the Code of Hermes. And the Code of Hermes is basically like, yo, wizard bro rules, right? It's basically like, don't be a dick, but in wizardese. A covenant is a group that gets together and says, look, we're going to form our own sort of structure, our own hierarchy. Okay. This allows them to share resources and cooperate more easily. In the overwhelming majority of cases, covenants are formed by magi who want to live in the same place, sharing access to a magical aura, buildings, and servants. Thus, the term covenant has come to refer to a place where a number of magi live together, as well as the group of magi making the agreement. So in other words, a covenant is like your own little wizard community, okay? A typical covenant has about half a dozen magi as members, aka the player characters. But they range from 2 magi to large organizations with over 24 magi and hundreds of mundane staff. Most Ars Magica sagas, that's your campaign sagas, center around a single covenant, and ensuring that that covenant prospers is as important as individual advancement. So this is where we get into sort of like what would feel like kind of almost more like a Blades in the Dark style idea, where in Blades in the Dark, you have your scoundrels, but your scoundrels belong to the crew, right? And the crew is its own character. In fact, in Blades in the Dark, the crew literally gets its own sheet. And so there's this idea that your characters are sort of like cogs in the wheel, right? It's the covenant that really goes on. And if you can imagine playing a generational saga, right, where every session might be, there might be, months or seasons or years between each season, that over the course of playing for a year, you might have had 40 or 50 or 60 years pass. And so you've literally gone on to the next generation, but the covenant remains. So in a sense, covenant becomes as much of a kind of a group character as anything. The game talks about this a little bit, but as a result of this, Ars Magica campaigns or sagas tend to be very focused geographically, right? These aren't your typical D&D adventurers where you're, globe trotting and, sprinting all around the globe. You are tied to sort of a place and a community of people and buildings and places and things. And so as a result, there's a lot of NPC type interaction because you're going to be meeting with these people over and over and over again. And I think that's really, really interesting. That's not something we typically see. But again, adventuring isn't what these characters do. They might go on adventure, but it's almost like, you taking a road trip to the other side of the country. Yeah, you'll do it. And, it's like, oh, it's a cool adventure, but that's not like your day job. You know what I mean? And so that's the way it is for these characters, right? They want to live and work and do what they want to do, but, by and large, they are not adventurers, right? So, it talks about the Code of Hermes. It talks about, what basically wizards do and the rules of all that shit. We're not going to get into that. The tribunals are like the Volturi from Twilight, right? There's like the council of mages who have power and judgment over a given region of mythical Europe. So again, tons of lore and background about not just like, but here's the thing. It's not just like, here's a description of every town in Europe. It's about setting the tone, right? It's about setting the idea of what this game world looks like. It's trying to create a reasonable facsimile of what medieval Europe would be like if you had magic wizards in it. So that's chapter 2. So before we go on to chapter 3, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to stop, catch up with chat. If anybody has a question or a comment, wants to throw a super chat, let's do that now. So let me just quickly check up here. Benjamin says, Mark Rainhagen was one of the creators of both Ars Magica and Vampire. Okay, I'm not as familiar with Vampire. That would be why I didn't know his other work. Later on, Ars was owned by White Wolf for a bit, so it's kind of been in continuity with the World of Darkness on and off. Interesting. That's very interesting. Legend of the Five Rings is kind of the same way in that Legend of the Five Rings was created by AEG, then it got sold to Wizards of the Coast, then it got sold back to AEG, then it got sold to Fantasy Flight Games, and now it kind of got spun off into a subsidiary of Fantasy Flight Games called Edge Studios. So it's interesting when a game property has been handled by so many different Companies. Viking, who apparently is a Ars Magica player, says the Covenant is the real main character. Interesting. Don Pokey says, oh, wow, this game really pushes on the Kingdom Group crew building and exploration harder than I thought. I guess this is a natural result of a more long-form approach like this. And I think you're right. I think it is a natural result of a long-term approach. Yeah, magi are homebodies as a rule. So you need to be in your lab and make cool shit. Exactly. Yes, wizarding as a job. Exactly. So again, the idea here is that, your Ars Magica character sounds like they would be the perfect NPC wizard who hires your PCs in D&D. And I should point out, GM Scott, that is where, that's a great segue, GM Scott, because we're going to talk about the character types. And we've talked a lot about the magi, right? Which is, again, the spell casting. And this is defined, by the way, by them possessing something that they call the gift, right? Which it's in capital letters, so you know it's important. But long story short, this is something that, I think they say that in medieval Europe at this time, there might be a little over 1,000 people with the gift, right? So that gives you a sense for how rare magic is. I think they use the number 1,200, if I can recall correctly. But there are other characters, and that is what the companions are for. Because magi are very limited. And like you said, GM Scott, they don't have time to go do a dungeon run. And so they have companions. Seems a little Strixhaven-y. Yeah, sure. Harry Potter, Strixhaven, like all of that stuff. I agree. It's wizard school. It's wizard, but it's also like wizard politics, right? It's sort of like wizard intrigue. So again, the way that I've described Legend of the Five Rings before is as a, I didn't describe it this way. Dave Thomover described it this way. He said, it's a Bushido simulator. Ars Magica is like a wizard simulator, So yeah, companion is a non-magus. And again, your companions, have little in common with one another. One might be a knight and a veteran of the Crusades. Another might be a wandering friar. A third can be an ungifted redcap. Still another, a noblewoman. Because the Order of Hermes, that's the Order of Wizards, stands somewhat outside of medieval society, it tends to attract those who do not fit in. So a companion could be a woman who wants to serve as a knight, or a priest who has supernatural visions and has tipped into heresy, or a werewolf seeking someone who might be able to cure her of her affliction. In other words, it's like your companions are like Buffy is the magi, right? And then Willow and Xander and Cordelia and Giles, those are all companions, right? And Oz, right? Literally a werewolf. Those are all the companions. Buffy is the one, the chosen one, the slayer. All the other characters are important and they're great and they're cool and we should focus on them, but they're not the slayer, right? It's not called Buffy and Gang, right? The show's called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but those are her companions. So if you think magi equals slayer, Scooby Gang equals companions, you're kind of getting the right idea for that. And again, companions should generally not have the gift, right? So that the companions are designed to be these sort of almost like D&D type characters, while your magus is actually your like real character. And then lastly, they have grogs. Grogs are minor characters, often warriors who protect the magi and defend the covenant, but also specialists such as teachers or bookbinders, right? Throw away red shirt NPCs. As minor characters, grogs tend to have bad things happen to them. Warrior grogs die defending the magi. Others might be possessed by spirits, forced to marry a fairy lord, or die from disease. In most versions of troop-style play, grogs are played by many different players, and the story guide simply, that's the name of the GM, the story guide, simply tells the players what happens to the grog. On the other hand, grogs are a great deal of fun to play as well. You don't need to worry about the consequences of your actions because you probably won't be playing this character next week. And everybody gets it. This character isn't a magi. They're not a companion. They're a grog, right? They say you can ham it up. You can ham up the acting and have the grog do something stupidly heroic or heroically stupid. Tim Chapman, welcome to the adventure. Tim joining the adventure as a new member, enjoying his brand new loyalty badge, and of course, access to our fun emojis. Tim, thank you so much for throwing your support our way. I appreciate that. That is very, very generous of you. And as Smog said, you are indeed strong, strong, strong. Thank you very much, Tim. And with that, Tim takes the lead and becomes our new hype boss up there in the upper left-hand corner. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Let's see here. Ayla finally caught up. The idea of playing different characters depending on whether or not they are involved is a really fun idea to me. Oh, okay. JJX says, I definitely wanted to run Ars Magica after reading book 8 of the Dresden Files. It gets into the messy wizard council politics, but contemporary times. And I think, to put it bluntly, yeah, wizard politics is going to be a big part of this game. So grogs are basically super minor characters. And as a result, you have, and there's also an element here. Your magi belongs to you. Your companions belong to you. Grogs are sort of available for anybody and everybody. Some different people might play grogs multiple times, right? Like I might play that grog this week and then you play that grog another time in the future, but they're just so minor that they don't matter. They're simple. They don't have as much complexity or depth, but they are just really designed to be sort of expendable. And it's just basically, I think, a way to represent the fact that, the magi who are members of a covenant, again, they're working together, but they're not necessarily a party. They're not necessarily allies in that sense. So, they may occasionally do things which is like, look, I'm not involving the other magi. And it's like, I'm going to bring my companions with me. And it's like, okay, well, player A has a companion that is tied to me and player B has a companion, which is tied to me. But what about player C and player D? They don't have companions that are tied to me. It doesn't really make sense in the storyline. You know what? You guys could play grogs this session and you guys will be just like the red shirts, the hired muscle, the meat that comes along us in this adventure. And you guys can go, cool. Like this doesn't affect our XP progression. We're not going to gain or lose XP. That's not the way XP works in this session. And we don't really have to risk anything because everybody knows that these characters are kind of throwaway. So we'll have fun with it. And we'll just be like go save yourselves. I'll hold them off. Right. And then, just have fun with it. I think that is a really fun, interesting way. But again, I could see where people might not like this because they're just really obsessed with the idea of playing just that one character. They don't want to waste a session playing a character that isn't theirs. Get a drink of water here. What's everybody doing? Everybody excited for the holidays? You guys have plans for those of you who celebrate? Holiday plans? Big ones. Small and simple. All right, we got poll out there. Yes, happy Midwinter's Day. Happy solstice to everybody. That's very cool. My wizard would just be feeding grogs into the meat grinder. Love it. You know what? Oh, Aloy, that is perfect. Aloy, that is absolutely perfect. I completely agree with you. That he is a perfect example of a grog. It doesn't mean you don't like the character. It doesn't mean that the character, right? But the character does not have the complexity and the depth that other characters have. You know, if Mira and Jojen were companions of Bran, who was the magi, Hodor was definitely a grog.
Anonymous tipped $25 for the pronunciation. Also, looks like a cool game. Definitely has a unique set of expectations regarding player agency and shifting characters session to session.
I am going to assume that was Henry because he always tips anonymously. And it was our boy Henry. Thank you, Henry. Yes, I agree. I do think I think that's the important part, Henry. I think Henry's absolutely right. When we're talking about Ars Magica, there are some real significant departures for your average game. For starters, I'm going to say this is not a game I think that you play a short version of. This is a game that is literally designed to take, decades of time in the game. And if you were to play decades of time in 5 or 6 sessions, it's like the movie Click with Adam Sandler, right? When he starts fast forwarding his life so much to get through the boring parts, you realize how much he missed. And so I think that like in this game, if you're doing like these super hyper mega time jumps, you're going to miss a lot of the fun intricacies. Now, again, the game moves at the pace of seasons, right? So clearly there's supposed to be some, if you're going down to the nitty gritty and you're like, okay, well today and tomorrow and next week, it's like, okay, we are never going to get anywhere in this game. Things take a long time. It's medieval fucking Europe. But I think if you play at a pace of play where it's like, every session is a season or 2. And like, so like, if you're playing every week or maybe twice a month, it's like, yeah, we're getting through, let's say you play twice a month and you do 2 seasons of sessions. Like we're getting through a year of the campaign every month. And so yeah, I think that's a really cool idea that is just very different from what we're typically used to seeing. So thank you, Henry. What do you got? That's the other good point, Pepper, like it's cool to have different characters. Plus, one of my biggest gripes that I sometimes have when I play D&D or Pathfinder is like, I'm like, yeah, I like my character, but it'd be cool to play a cleric for a little while, or it'd be cool to play a rogue for a little while, or, oh, the new kineticist just came out. I'd love to make a kineticist, but I don't want to give up on my main character. So it's kind of a fun way to just have like a bunch of different tools for the different jobs. I think that's really cool. Selena is heading to New Jersey and hanging out with people I play D&D with in real life. Now that is awesome. That I applaud. Got holiday dinner and some Fallout 2D20. Ooh, little 2D20, a little Morpheus action coming in from Photo Bunnies. Nice. Very, very nice. Yes, I suppose it's the shortest day in the Northern Hemisphere only. Shadram, I apologize. Yes, that is true. The longest day. I always forget about that. Here's the thing. I can accept the fact that like my spring is your fall and my fall is your spring. But the idea that it is literally the shortest day of the year for me and it is the longest day of the year for other people, very strange. It blows my mind. That's another great point, Benjamin. If you're familiar with more old school hirelings, I think that's really, really good comparison as well. All right, let's see what we got here. All right. So 60% of you say short and simple, small and simple for their holiday plans. That's awesome. 26% of you have big plans. 13% say nope. And 0% say yes, sadly. Yes, mine falls into the small and simple plans. Christmas Eve, my sister usually throws together a big thing for our family, but it sounds like it's going to be very subdued this year. And it's just going to be her immediate family, my brother-in-law, my mom, my dad, her 2 children, and I think maybe that might be it. So we're just going to go over there and, we're just going to have some food, and I'll probably be back home, to spend Christmas Eve at home, which would be nice. See here. Yeah, I think it's interesting, Tim. I think the idea of long-term planning and grand goals, this is a game that like, right. I mean, again, it really breathes, you know what I mean? It really breathes. Panic says, this sounds really cool. Time to introduce variable casts into my never ever PF2E game. Reminds me of the Chain live play that Mr. Colville did. I never watched any of his Chain of Acheron stuff. I don't really watch a lot of actual plays, actually. Chilling by the beach with rum sounds amazing. I'll never get used to summer Christmas. Yes, absolutely. My family doesn't do anything small or simple, but I love them for it. Well, you know what? That's all that really counts, Yes, food and games with families. This is the way. Yes. Yeah, Ken, that's a great idea. That's a great point. Star Trek Adventures does this really well, where you have the bridge characters and then you have your secondary characters. I can't remember what they call them in Star Trek Adventures, but you are absolutely right. Because, if somebody's playing the doctor's maybe not going to go on the way mission, right? You send Commander Riker and you send Lieutenant Worf and Geordi LaForge, because it's like an engineering thing, but no doctor. It's like, well, who am I going to play? It's like, you could play random security guard number 2, So I think it's interesting. So going back to our character basics. Here we see a little bit of the Pendragon BRP influence. We've got some what are called characteristics. There are 8 characteristics, and 0 in this system is average. So above 0, good. Below 0, bad. And I will say this. I like, you might say, well, modern day RPGs, D20, are no longer based around a +0 modifier, right? Like they're based around a +4 modifier, if you really think about it, right? Like if a character has a +1 in a stat nowadays, you would pretty much say, oh yeah, that's low. I like that 0 is average. I think it just makes sense. It's very easy. It's very intuitive. If I'm adding a number, I'm good at this. If I'm subtracting a number, I'm not good at this. So I think that is really, really, really interesting. And I very much prefer that, like more so than anything else. And again, characteristics are going to fall between -3 and +3. And again, we're talking about a D10 roll. And remember, the DC chart went from 0, 3, 6, now all the way up to 24. So you're talking about a D10 roll, right? +1, +2 is a big chunk of that D10. So it can make a big difference. But I like that just positive equals good, negative equals bad, 0 equals average. So what do we get? Well, we've got intelligence, we've got perception, we've got strength, stamina, presence, communication. There's a new one, huh? Communication represents the aptitude for self-expression. It is important when attempting to influence or communicate with someone verbally or otherwise. A positive communication score suggests that a character who is comfortable with or confident in their relationships with other people. That's very interesting. Dexterity means being able to move with agility and manipulate objects accurately and skillfully. Quickness is reaction speed and reflexes. So you got a couple different changes here than what we normally have. I mean, there's 8 ability scores for starters. But, a lot of times the mechanics of the game are going to tell you what those things are about. All right. Now, those are our characteristics, which we would call ability scores or attributes in other parts of the game, in other D20 systems, and they seem fairly common. So we also then have our abilities, and abilities are skills. That's what they are. They're skills. They're called abilities in this game, but there are 5 different types of abilities that we can learn. There's a big list of them later on, which we'll get to, but they basically are general abilities, which can be learned by anybody. So those are your generic skills that don't really require any sort of special training. And then we have 4 additional categories of abilities. Remember, abilities equals skills. You have academic abilities, arcane abilities, martial abilities, and supernatural abilities. A character can only learn academic, arcane, or martial abilities if they have an appropriate virtue or flaw, or if you're just a magus. Maguses are sweet, they're awesome, they're badasses, they can take anything they want. A character cannot learn or use a supernatural ability at all unless they have the specific virtue which grants it, or, of course, if they have the gift. So, virtues and flaws are basically feats and anti-feats. But in this game, you get 0 feats. You can only take virtues by taking flaws. So if you want to get cool little perks for your character, you have to take flaws. In fact, they give a really, really significant thing here about how to not let people metagame that. Just real quick, they have personality traits here. They basically say personality traits are just more of like a informative thing for your magus or your companion. They don't really affect anything. You can just, play your character however you want, but this is sort of a, it's like hey, my character is greedy, so I should play them as greedy, but there's no requirement on them. On the other hand, personality traits on a grog, because remember, a grog might be played by several different players. And so you lose a little bit of your control of that character in that way. And so grogs tend to rely on these personality traits, and they kind of, you might have to make checks to see how brave your grog is or how loyal your grog is, right? And, so this is where there's a little bit of that kind of non-actorial control, right? Like the game, like Pendragon, right? Where your character is sort of driving itself. But this only happens with the grogs, not with your main characters. So seeing here in chat that that people are saying that there's a lot of White Wolf influence here. Same thing with flaws and merits. Now remember, this game, this is 5th edition, so I don't know what the first edition of this game looked like, but remember, this game came out in 1987 originally, so I think this came out before White Wolf. What was Vampire, like 92, 93? Is that right? Point Blank. What up? Like your avatar. I agree too. Communication was very important when training someone else like your apprentice. That's true. That's true. We haven't even gotten to this yet, but there's a lot of responsibilities to your mage, including training your apprentices. So I mentioned before, so everything that we've talked about so far, I think we can all agree with this, has been pretty damn simulationist. Okay. So here is where we get a little bit into some of the narrative elements of the game. And this is something called confidence. Important characters have a confidence score and confidence points. Confidence points, think hero points. The score just tells you how many of them you can spend at one time. This includes both central player characters, such as magi and companions, not grogs, as well as important NPCs. So kind of think NPC points or villain points. These characters start with 3 confidence points. There's no limit to the number of confidence points a character can have. You can spend a confidence point on most rolls to get a +3 to the total per point spent. You may decide to spend the point after the dice are rolled and the punitive nature of the action is known. If you botch, you cannot. Once it is spent, it is gone forever. And you cannot spend them on rolls which represent an entire season's of activities, such as rolls for studying from Weiss. So basically, you can roll your die, and then you can spend confidence points to make your character get a +3 bonus. And remember, the DCs go in increments of 3. So basically, like 3, 6, 9, 12. So spending a confidence point is basically like virtually like after the fact, after you know what the dice roll is giving you an entire difficulty class upgrade. Now, remember, like I said, though, you can spend more than one of these things. You start with 3 and you don't get them back normally. You have to earn them. But in the beginning of the game, your confidence level is 1. So you can only spend 1 confidence point at a time. But if your confidence level was 2 or 3, you could spend 2 or 3 confidence points on one roll. Now, that's a significant investment, but that means you could take something up +9. And in this game, when you're doing things like maybe creating magical artifacts or trying to shield your little covenant from, make it fade from view to avoid an oncoming war, right? Or like big stuff, big epic stuff. There might be a moment where you go, this is where my character decides to really, double down. So how do you get new confidence points? Well, you hand them out at the end of every session. So it's a session-based award. To qualify for confidence points, the character must have been played for a significant length of time, and you can be awarded 1 confidence point for each of the following things that you manage to do. If you achieve a personal goal, if you contribute to the achievement of a group goal, if you succeed in a difficult task, if you entertainingly well roleplayed, and as a bonus, if the story guide thinks that you deserve one. So there is a possibility that you can earn up to 5 of these confidence points per session. Typically, characters will gain 2 to 3. But what about that score? Because the score is how many we can spend at one time. I could imagine maybe my character, maybe I'm a really good role player and I'm achieving a lot of my goals, and so is my crew. I've got 15 confidence points in my bank. There's no limit and they don't reset. But my confidence level is 1. That means I can only spend 1 point at a time on a roll. I can never spend more than 1 point when I make a roll. Well, this is where your confidence score comes in. And this can only be increased. Now, again, this is where we talk about diegetic progression. A character's confidence score can only be increased by long-term story events, which greatly increase the character's self-reliance and self-confidence. Tim, enjoy. I'm glad you were able to come in. Thank you again for your support. I hope you enjoy the VOD. If you have any questions or comments, Tim, let us know in the comments below. We'll get back to you. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Remember, we're going to be streaming a bunch, so hope to see you around and appreciate your support. Thank you so much. So in other words, if your character has an amazing, awesome, incredible success, I forged the blade that cannot be broken, right? I stopped the tsunami from destroying our town. I think we all might agree, the GM might agree, you know what? Your confidence level rises. And again, as a result, this is diegetic progression. So pretty cool stuff. And then they give us some examples. So this is an example of some grogs. Okay. So this is a simple character, simple. We can see you've got your characteristics. Remember, those are your ability scores. Size works the same way, by the way. 0 is average, +1's bigger, +2 is real big. How old you are. Why is there something in parentheses on age? Well, because this game is about wizards, and your age, there's how old you are and how old you appear to be. Decrepitude, that's how much age is fucking you up. Warping score is how much magic has fucked you up. Here are your flaws and your virtues. Here's your combat abilities. And here are all your different skills and scores. So you can imagine that if our character was trying to do athletics, they have an athletics value of 2. And their strength is +3. So if we were doing an athletics strength roll, we would add 5 to our D10. Now, this is a lot of text. I'm not going to lie. Now, I will say that this is like the character sheet for like for a character. So, there is a nicer way to present this. We've got our characteristics here. We've got our decrepitude, how aging has affected us. We have the warping, how has magic warped us. Here's all of our personal information. Remember, abilities mean skill. We have our virtues, think positive feats. Flaws, think negative feats. We have our reputation tracker, personality traits, stuff about our combat stuff like how fatigued we are, how many wounds we've taken, what weapons do we have available to us. And then we get into the magic stuff. We haven't even touched on magic. That's what we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about. So we've got our characters. Now, I said before, there's a whole list of virtues and flaws, and you have to take flaws in order to get virtues. Okay. And there's a limit, but virtues are basically, and again, you can start the game with these. These are just, the things that you start with. And these can be everything from magical bonuses to social statuses. Maybe your character's a knight or a noble person. Maybe you have heart beast, enduring magic, the enigma, fairy magic. And I'm not even going to lie. I don't know what any of these things do. All I know is there's a shitload here. Okay. And again, so these are all the flaws and virtues that your character can take. And there's a big, long chapter with some more amazing art that, really, really describes things to that end. Now, as a result, the next thing that we talked about, and again, we're not going to go into the super detail about it, are abilities, which again, think skills. Now, what's interesting about this is abilities come down to general stuff anybody can know, and then more specific skills. Like this is literally liberal arts, artes liberales, philosophiae, right? Some Latin thrown in there. Of important note is under the arcane abilities is the Parma Magica. All right. And Parma Magica is, again, that magical shield that every wizard knows. Basically, wizards are really good at defending themselves against magic, like insanely good. And that means that magic can potentially actually be really, really impossible or bad or hard to use against other wizards. So in that way, you can see why having companions, it's almost like they can't hurt each other, right? Like they have such a strong counter to each other's magic that that's kind of why you have to rely on these other characters, and why it might be they really can't maybe strike at each other directly. It's kind of a very interesting thing. You know, we talk a lot on this channel about how the rules and the mechanics of the setting should make sense if the game is trying to be have any sort of verisimilitude. Like if these wizards were this powerful, why wouldn't they just, blow all the other wizards away? Well, because they can't, because why do I need some schlub with a sword when I can cast insta death from across the world? Well, because that person is really, really defensive against magic, right? So it's a really, really interesting idea. And just so we're kind of clear here, let's see if I can find it. Here we go. The Parma Magica. This is a special ritual, but it's not a ritual spell, that takes about 2 minutes to perform. It lets you add 5 times your Parma Magica score to the magic resistance until the next sunrise or sunset, whichever comes first. It does not require concentration while it is active. So, in short, 5 times your Parma Magica score, if you have a Parma Magica score of 2 or 3, you're adding 10 or 15 to your defense. Remember, we're rolling D10 plus ability modifier here. That's a huge number. I mean, once you are a master level wizard, maybe an apprentice could be still schooled by a master. But once you have like 2 or 3 ranks in this, you basically are kind of immune to magic to a certain extent, right? So that is something that I think is really, really cool because it puts a limitation on this otherwise completely ridiculous and broken abilities. So then they talk about covenants, and this is, again, is sort of your little, like your home base, and they've got rules for it. Like, how powerful is it? How many build points do you get to build your home base, and how many resources does it have, and what do you have access to, and libraries and smithies, and it's just going on and 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 on. It is very, very detailed. Then they've got information about magic and what it means to have the gift and to be able to cast magic. But what I really want to talk about here is the techniques. So, because again, this is what I really wanted to cover here, because this is how the game works. The way that the game works, and actually let me go back up to the characters. So here is an example of a magus character, right? This is not a grog. So this is an 87-year-old. This is Darius of Flambeau. He appears 64. He's actually 87. He's taken some warping, right? Magic has started to fuck with him. We can see that he has the gift, Hermetic Magus, Puissant Art, Flawless Magic, Affinity with Perdo, Enduring Constitution, Fast Cafter, Prestige, Premonitions, Second Sight, Strong-Willed, Blatant Gift, Driven, Enemies, Disfigured. We can see that he is not very effective in combat. We can see all of his different skills: athletics, grammar, awareness, brawl. But we can also see his spells. So every spell in this game is custom. Every spell in this game is made using a verb noun system and using a table similar to Dragonlance 5th Age to create a effect. And ultimately, it's something that you and your GM or group will sort of right size, because, the formula might say it's this, and everybody agrees it's probably this or this, right? And you just right size it. But you name it and you give it a cool name. And I got to tell you something here. This is so much like Earthsea. It's crazy to me, right? And so just, Cripple, the Howling Wolf, Parching Wind, Curse of the Desert, the Kyurgeon's Healing Touch, Whispers through the Black Gate, the Inexorable Search, the Wound that Weeps, the Twist of the Tongue, the Lifting of the Dangling Puppet, the 7 League Stride, right? So these are all of this character's spells that he knows and can cast. So how do we make these spells? Well, basically, there's a whole section about how you create spells and how spells are created. But similar, again, I cannot help but feel like this is the inspiration for this. You are basically going to be putting together the ranges, the duration, and the targets. And that is going to help you sort of decide what this, what are the base level effects of this spell. But furthermore, what happened here? Here we go. Where did it go? Did I lose it? I thought I had it, and then I seem to have lost it. Covenant. No. Hermetic Magic. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the way it works is your mage will have skill in every single one of the hermetic arts. But some of them they're going to be better at, and some of them they're going to be weaker at. So the first thing are the techniques, which are like the verbs. So the first is creo, I create. The next is intelligo, I perceive. The next is muto, I transform. Perdo, I destroy. Rego, I control. Those are the techniques. Those are the verbs. Then there are the forms. There is animal, animals. There is aquam, water. There is aurum, air. There is corpus, the body. There is herbam, the plant. Ignem, the fire. There is imaginum, the image. Mentem, the mind. Terram, earth. And Weem, power. So basically, by combining the 5 techniques with one of the 10 forms, you basically, and then combining that with range and duration and powers and effects, you basically end up with a template to create essentially any magical effect that you can kind of think of. This is really, really, really cool. So now there are limitations to this. There are, even magic cannot do everything. And so, the game goes into a really, long sort of explanation of that type of stuff. And this is where the game is really, really interesting, is formulaic magic. These are the spells. So a lot of what a wizard is doing, a lot of what a mage is doing is they are trying to learn spells. They are going to Hogwarts and they are learning spells, right? They are trying to master more spells. So this is called formulaic magic. This is the use of spells that the magus already knows. All right. And so the casting total is your casting score, which again, you combine by combining 2 different abilities, 2 different stats, plus a die roll. All right. This type of die roll depends on the situation. If the magus is not under any pressure, it is a simple die roll. If you are in a stressful situation, it is a stress die roll, which means that, right, you can botch and something can go terribly wrong. If the magus has mastered the spell, the die is always a stress die, but in a calm situation, there is no botch dice. If the casting total equals or exceeds the level of the spell is cast and the magus suffers no ill effects. In other words, if you beat or equal, higher, more powerful spells, you're going to have a higher DC that you have to roll. So you have to roll to cast and you have to beat it with your total. If you get it or higher, boom, you get it. If it fails or if it falls short of the spell level by 10 or less, the spell takes effect and you lose a fatigue level. So if it falls short a little bit, it still goes off. You just get drained, right? Physically. If it falls short by more than 10, it doesn't take effect. And you also become more fatigued and more drained. Okay. It only takes a few seconds to cast a formulaic spell. So casting a formulaic spell, a spell that you have mastered, a spell that you know, is pretty great. If you beat it, great. You get the spell, no questions, no harm, no fuss. If you fail, you become drained and weakened, but you still get the spell off. It's only if you really fail that you don't get the spell off. But there are other ways to cast magic. And one of the ways is spontaneous magic. This involves the production of effects which do not correspond to a spell that the magus knows. Magi may choose whether or not to exert themselves when casting spontaneous magic, but this affects the total. If a magus exerts herself, she loses a fatigue level, which we would say gain a fatigue level using modern terms, immediately after the spell is cast. So if this loss renders her unconscious, the spell takes place first. And now you can see that when you're casting spontaneously, aka, I don't have this spell. I don't have create firewall. It's not a spell that I know, but I can still do it if I have a really good creo, which is create, and ignum, which is fire. The only difference is I'm going to roll my die and I'm going to add my bonuses, but I divide by 2. And that's if I'm draining my essence. If I want to cast a spontaneous spell for free and not drain my body of its vital energy, it's my total divided by 5. AKA, you either have to be really, really badass, or more likely, it has to be a very, very minor effect. So what does this mean for our game world? It means that maguses will have the ability, once they reach a certain level, to basically spontaneously create nearly any effect as long as it is minor enough, because they're not going to suffer any fatigue. They don't have the spell known, but because it's divided by 5, this limits you to the relative power level. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to summon an army of demons spontaneously like that. But if you're a magus, a powerful magus, and you're like, I want to create I don't have this ability, but I want to it's dark and I want to create a pinpoint of light or a flickering flame. I can do that spontaneously and not even suffer any fatigue from it if it's a weak enough effect, because my casting total is divided by 5, but I can still do it. That is awesome. That is really, really cool. So any case, very, very, very cool. And let's be clear here. I'm not going to mince words with you. There's a lot of rules for casting these spells. It can be, this is where the simulationism comes in, right? How hard is it to concentrate? If a spell requires concentration, how hard is it? I'm standing still. Well, then that's a 0. Am I walking? Well, that's DC 3. Am I jostled? That's DC 9. Have I been knocked down? Well, it's DC 12. And without getting too much into it, the other method is ritual magic. Now, this is where ritual magic, look at ritual magic. So spontaneous magic, we're dividing by 2, or if we're not paying any price, we're dividing by 5, thus limiting it to the most basics of magics. If we know the spell, it's our die roll plus our totals. A good number, but what if we have a really big effect? How are we going to get that really big number? Well, this is where ritual magic comes in. Ritual spells are like formulaic spells, but they take longer to cast, and they involve elaborate rituals and the expenditure of raw whis. That's like, think raw whis, think magical components, right? Think powerful, a unicorn's horn, I don't know, blood of a virgin. I don't know, right? Something magical and mystical and powerful. It takes 15 minutes per magnitude to cast a ritual spell. Remember, to cast a formulaic spell, one that we know, only takes a few seconds. A ritual spell is something that might take an hour or more to cast. But now look, it's our casting score plus our ranks in liberal arts plus our philosophy score plus a die roll. This more elaborate process of casting a ritual spell allows the magus to incorporate astrological calculations and to draw upon the powers of natural magic. This is reflected by the addition of the liberal arts and philosophy scores to the casting total. The vis used in ritual spell must match the technique. In addition, let's see here. Also, you can lose fatigue. So, point is you can get a much higher score. And according to Viking, I did not know this, you can also cast rituals as a group. So if your group wants to get together and do the big, awesome, cool thing, you can. And it's just like you have 3 different ways to cast magic, all using this same sort of free form system. I find that to be very, very satisfying. And I agree with Ken. I think this is just a much better way to do cantrips. So again, lots of information here, like, are you using words and gestures? That gives you a penalty or a modifier, right? Like if you want to cast a character spell, you don't need a feat for this, but here's a table that tells you how to do it. If you want to cast spells quickly, then we have to make quickness checks, right? It's very, very, very things. Yeah. So these are your word level modifiers. I told you before, very highly simulationist game. But you know what? Here's the thing. Let's not mince words about it. This game, what is it? What is this game about? It's about wizards. The name of the game is Ars Magica. It literally means the art of magic. This is a game about casting spells. This is a game about wizardry. If these rules weren't here, I would be disappointed, right? If you're signing up for this kind of game, you're signing up for exactly this shit because you want your magic to be more involved and you want your magic to be more mystical and you want to gather the mana and you want to wait until the season is right and it is the night of the first full moon of winter, right? Like D&D and Pathfinder, those games are about heroic adventure. And so magic is just use a spell slot, cast fireball, 10d6 damage, and we move on because there's other characters and there's other things going on. This is a game that is very specifically about wizards. It's literally called Ars Magica. And so as a result, it gets pretty into the weeds on magic. And I think that is, I think that's awesome. I think that is what's really, really cool about it. But, and I don't want to belabor this point, going back to the beginning of the stream, it is this system that initially made me go, wow, cool. Now look, it's pretty academic. It's pretty dry, unless you're really into it. Now, and I'll be honest with you, 20-year-old Derek in the 2000, early 2000s, was like, wait a second, wait, what's this? You're a group of wizards who live in a little wizard commune and you don't go on adventures and you spend your time engaging in wizard politics and studying in your labs and reading and researching in your libraries. What kind of fucking game is this? I thought the magic system was cool because, again, I really loved the free-form magic system of Dragonlance 5th Age. But 40-year-old Derek, he's like, hell yeah. Like, this seems awesome. Like, wizard politics, I'm in, I think that's really, really cool. I think it's really, really interesting. So anyways, lots of information about casting spells and how the function of magic resistance. And we talked about the para magico and how basically it's really hard for wizards to hurt each other with magic, which is why why swords can be a thing. What was an example of that? Dune has like the bet, like Frank Herbert said, look, I want my characters to be, fighting hand to hand. And he's like, okay, well, why would you fight hand to hand in the far future? And he's like, I'll create shields, which have a force that is directly proportional to the kinetic energy of the thing striking me. In other words, a bullet, the shield is going to work. Whereas if someone has a sword or a dagger or a long knife, the shield will not work. And so as a result, because of shield shielding in Dune, you get space knights with swords, right? And there's a reason for it. And that way people don't just use their guns, you know? So again, really, really cool stuff. And again, this is a free-form magic system. So while there isn't going to be this massive list of spells, there is some examples, and there is some, a lot of, best practices, to say the least. So again, going into just all the difficulty here, we talk about warping. Again, magic seems great. What do we say? What we say? D&D. We say Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We say Galarian should be a magical paradise. Magic is really easily available, and there seems to be no cost for it. Not so in the world of Ars Magica. For when you cast magic and you're around magic a lot, it can begin to warp you, and it can twist you. And, like right here, note that magi gain 1 warping point for every 0 on the botch dice when they botch a spell. So when you botch a spell and you roll some 0s, you are going to start to be transformed by the magic in a negative way. So you're not going to just sit there and cast spells willy-nilly, because there is a price. And this isn't something that you can heal up with a long rest. This is permanent. This is forever. Eventually, if a wizard gains enough warping, they can enter what's called the wizard twilight. And this is basically how like a wizard starts to die, essentially. So very, 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 very ordered and structured thing. Here's Kertam, which is like a magical duel rules. Seems very like Legend of the Five Rings to me, with just a ton of rules about all of this. Chapter 8 is just about laboratories. Okay, laboratories, if you want to call them that. I like calling them laboratories. Look at this. Look. A magus spends much more time in his laboratory, engaged in study and other activities, than adventuring in lands outside of the Covenant. There are arts to study books, books to write, spells to invent, and items to enchant. Time between stories is recorded in seasons, each of which is enough time to accomplish a single long-term laboratory activity. Each of those activities is described in this chapter. There's literally an entire chapter about how you and your group might get together, and the entire session is just a couple seasons of you all just working in your laboratories, being wizards and doing wizard shit. Not going into dungeons, not exploring, none of that stuff. It's kind of getting into the wizardy shit. So again, entire chapter just about laboratories. So chapter 9 is all about how do we actually create these spells? And this gives you all sorts of guidelines and restrictions about range and requisites and effect and title. Getting to the, how things work. I mean, because again, you can literally do anything with these magics. And so then they give you some examples, right? There are some spells that have been, kind of created in the world. As a wizard, you can create whatever you want to create, but here are some examples of spells all the way up to, a level 50 spell. So good luck casting that one, right? But if you had a powerful ritual, you could. This is just an example of the creo animal spells, which is create animals. Here is the intellio animal, which means perceive animals. Here is the muto, which is change. Here is the perdo, which is the destroy. Here is the rego, which is the control. And these aren't the spells, right? You can create your own spells. These are just examples of these are in the common formula books, right? That are more generally well known. And again, as examples, and they give you these for every one of the techniques and the forms. So they give them to you for the water spells. They give them to you for the air spells, and they all have really cool names. Charge of the angry winds, circling winds of protection, The Incantation of Lightning. Those are cool names. All right. Finally, we have, we're casting all these spells. We're doing all this stuff. What about the long-term stuff? Well, this is where advancement comes in. And this is where you gain experience points. Experiencer points are awarded every season. That is 3 months based on your activities during that season. I cannot stress this enough. Most D&D campaigns, most PF2 campaigns these days, I mean, they're over within probably, 3 to 6 months. In this game, that means that your character, it would be the equivalent of me being like, okay, you're playing Pathfinder 2, and you're like, okay, well, you gained 300 experience points and 400 experience points. It's like the entire campaign. It's like, okay, well, that's not good. So in order for your character to get strong, in order to be a powerful wizard, time has to happen. And a lot of it comes down to, what did you do during that, during that period of time? Did you study? Did you adventure? Did you train? Did you teach? Did you practice? And if you did study and you did teach, did you use books? Did you do it with lectures? Were you distracted at all? Did you write books? Did you copy books? All of this stuff literally gives you experience points. This is how your character earns experience points. It's diegetic experience points in a sense, because if I want to be a higher level wizard, I need to write books and study. End of story. Like, that's what it really comes down to. Let's see here. Don Pokey says, Derek has been on fire with comparisons and allegory so far, and he seems pretty thorough, even without comprehensive knowledge of the game. Should be a good catch up. Thank you, Don Pokey. The dirty secret of the spell system is it's really a legal system. You argue for the spell you want from the precedent of the spells that were printed. Yes, I could totally see that. Where you're like, well, if you look here, you can see that this spell is only 25 points, and my spell is clearly not as strong as that spell, so it should be 23. And again, you might say, oh, that sounds horrible and awful. Kind of, but like, that's kind of the point of the game. Obviously, if you have your GM and your players and you're always fighting each other, but remember, the role of the story guide goes around the table, or it can go around the table. And as a result, like, it's no one person's game. There should never be one person's game. But Shadram says mine would just be called Ball of the Fire. 3 months in game or out of game? In game. And we'll get to that at the last thing that we cover. Lord High Summoner, we'll cover that. The way scheduling goes for me, it would be both. We could play this in real time. That's fantastic. So again, the game proceeds at a, dare I say, glacial pace. And here's a bunch of rules. Okay, so time is passing. Guess what? We get older. We start to age. We start to turn decrepit. We start to accumulate decrepit points. And we have to, what kind of living conditions did we have? Do we have an aging crisis? Right? I mean, this is some really, really heavy simulationist stuff here. Chapter 11 is about obstacles, which is mostly about the combat section. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really read this section. I don't really know this section. I'm going to skip it, but for all that you need to know is, the game does have combat section for when, people start fighting hand to hand. Chapter 12 is all about the different realms of existence. You basically have, the divine realms, the fairy realms, the demonic realms. So there's a little bit here about magical creatures and magical auras. And the world of magic that kind of exists below the real world, right? In this world, angels and devils are real. The church may not necessarily be wizards in the sense that they are not members of the Order of Hermes, but like the powers of the church are kind of presumed to be not necessarily clerical, because we think clerics, we think, D&D clerics who can cast spells, but it's more like they have allies and tools as well. So there's a whole, again, more lore and more stuff about building the game and building the game world. Chapter 13 is a bestiary about all sorts of weird, cool, crazy creatures that exist in this mythic Europe. Chapter 14 is just about mythic Europe. going into detail about this sort of, you know, again, this is high Middle Ages era, right? 1200. I don't know if that's late Middle Ages or if that's Middle Ages. It might be like the high Middle Ages, but you know, it's basically, if you're familiar with 7th Sea, it's kind of a similar idea. 7th Sea is much later in time, but you know, this is peak medieval time, and it is Europe, just a mythic Europe. Here are how the tribunals are. You remember the tribunals are like, which wizard judge district do you live in? You know, so maybe you all live on maybe your covenant exists on a lonely, isolated part of Normandy, right? Up here near where Cherbourg would be today on the Carentan Peninsula. Well, you're part of the Normandy Tribunal, right? Then the game talks about stories. It talks about basically like, because remember, you're not really creating adventures or adventure paths here, but it talks about, you know, hooks and outcomes and reacting to stories and being reactive and, you know, sort of building up a communal story, which I think is really, really good. They have things about like ideas to explore, things like exploration, treasure hunting, request for assistance, crises at home, politics, quests. These are all the things that a group of wizards living in a covenant might be called upon, you know, and that's, as a story, you know, guide and as a group, you decide what you want to deal with and what interests you and how you want to play with it. But again, it's more of like medieval wizard simulator than it is adventure game. You might go on a quest, you might go on a treasure hunt, but the game isn't an adventuring game. And this is what I'm saying. This game is telling you straight up, it is not that thing. And then lastly, sagas. And this is basically campaigns. And this is where they talk about like, you know, what's the role of the different factions in your campaign? How are you going to use the rules? This is basically, you know, this book came out a long time ago. Today we would call this session 0 stuff, right? Like how much demons do we want in our saga, right? Demons and diabolists make excellent unambiguous enemies, but the extent to which you use them can have a very strong tone on your saga, aka campaign. So we could go with like a really dark, almost, you know, pagan kind of world where like demonic possession is common and a problem. And maybe like, you know, the Order of Hermes, the wizards are sort of like holding back against the darkness. And like the church is actually kind of like, they're like almost more like white cloaks from Wheel of Time, right? Where like they're trying to do the right thing, but they're like harsh and cruel about it. You know, they'll just come in and purge a village if they think that people are possessed, but the wizards are actually the ones fighting the war. So it's almost like this 3-part battle between the forces of demons, the church, and then the Order of Hermes, right? Like that might be what our campaign's about. Other people might say, no, that's not what I want our campaign to be about. So this is really just session 0 stuff here. And this is where they talk about the speed of the saga, right? This is what we've been talking about throughout the course of the night. You know, it says here, advancement in Ars Magica happens by seasons of game time. And so the number of seasons of game time that pass for every game session is an extremely important factor in determining the style of your saga. The ideal saga speed is entirely a matter of troop preference, but be aware of the implications. In a slow saga, you might have 2 or more game sessions per season. Characters do not improve much, and the different lifespans of magi versus their companions is largely irrelevant. You know, if you play, I don't know, a 50-session campaign and, you know, each season is 2 or 3 sessions, then you're only going to get through, you know, what, maybe 14 or 15 seasons. So you're only going to get through like 4 or 5 years. So the fact that the magi can live many hundreds of years and your companions don't won't really come into fruition. And quite frankly, your characters aren't going to get really powerful because you gain XP by season. On the other hand, you could have a medium saga. A medium saga has on average 1 to 4 seasons per game session. That means every session is going to be 3 months to a year. Characters do improve, but unless you play very frequently or for a very long time, magi are unlikely to die of old age or pass into their final twilight. This is a good compromise. And lastly, there's Fast Saga, where you might have more than 1 year passing for every game session. And this is great if you want to see like the generational play. But they also talk about how you might change it. You might go fast for like, a period of a decade, but then maybe the Wizard War breaks out and you slow it down for a little bit, for like 3 or 4 or 5 sessions. And before 3 or 4, 5 sessions would have been like a decade or 15 years or 20 years. But for the next couple of sessions, those 3 or 4 sessions only represent maybe 6 months or 12 months. So you could play with the time to sort of focus in on different points in time in your saga, and then zoom, kind of, hit the fast forward button when you want, kind of speed through to the next thing. And then lastly, they talk about sort of some of the unique nuances of playing with a troupe of characters instead of just playing with one base character. And then lastly, there's, a converting from 4th edition. Appendix 2 is got review for when you're creating a magical spell. Like, this is sort of the review checklist to make sure that, like, you have all of your, it's like a cheat sheet basically. So here's all your information here. Here's your basic information about casting spells. Here's all the stuff that you can do to gain experience points during a long-term event, basic information about combat. And lastly, and then here's an index of all the kind of baseline spells that are in the game. And again, there's quite a few of them, and again, they have really great names. Let's see, we got, Calm the Motion of the Heart, Calling the Council of the Trees, Chaos of the Angry Waves, Charge of the Angry Winds, Circular Ward against your demons, Closing the Earth's Gate. Oh, sounds awesome to me. That's on page 123. Let's guess what that does. Dries a single spring so that it never flows again. This spell targets the spring, not the water. So the spring does not start to flow again later. I would not have guessed that. But there you go. Now, here's the thing. You might say, Derek, isn't this exactly the kind of spell that you would shit on in Pathfinder 2? And you are right. I would. Why is it different here? Because Pathfinder 2 is a heroic adventuring game. This is not. Also, this game is about magic and creating spells and spontaneous spells and ritual spells. It's about communities. It's about politics. So yeah, sealing a spring shut could have dramatic implications. But also, this is a good example, because these are sort of bench points of what happens for a spell that is pretty powerful. The duration is indefinite, right? Or the timeline is indefinite. The range is touch, but the kind of effect that you can have. So this is where I think this is totally acceptable in this particular game. And then we get an index, which seems pretty good. Seems pretty longly filled out. And then we get our character sheet. And then we get an advertisement from Atlas Games. So that in about 2 hours is Ars Magica. And again, it's not for everybody. It may not even be for me, but it is very interesting. And there is a lot, there's been a lot of conversations that I've been having on the Nice Last Call Discord. If you're not a member of the Patreon and you want to be part of those conversations, they're happening every day. You know what? I'm not even going to sell it. Like, if you join and you participate and you want to learn, you will see why it's a different place. But anyways, point is, there's been a lot of conversations about, like, what is the role of magic in a game? In a D&D game or a Pathfinder game or whatever. This is what this whole game is about, that question and answering that question with your group. It is a wizard community storytelling system for simulating the lives and trials and tribulations of a group of wizards, and I think that is not everybody's cup of tea. The truth of the matter is, you're probably never going to get this game to the table. I don't want to say that this game is like Burning Wheel, where it's like just strictly aspirational, but there's a lot of Burning Wheel-esque elements here, which is, it's a very it's a game with a lot of rules. It's very in depth. But it's trying to do something that, if you're interested in what it has to do, could be particularly interesting. I've never really thought too much about generational play, but when we did the Pendragon review right there, I was like, oh, the idea of like creating a knightly household and seeing that knightly household, or that, turn into a noble household, and over the course of, time, was kind of interesting to me. And so I like the idea of time passing in RPGs. And I think that, this is a game that really gives you a better reason, that for why you would want that time to pass. I completely agree with Pumpkin. I like a lot of the ideas in this game. Not sure I'd ever play it though, but it looks cool. So yeah, so that is Ars Magica. Again, I this was not a deep dive. This was not this is more of like a kind of just talking a little bit about the mechanics, what the game is about, what the feel of the game is about. It is something very, very different. And the reason why I think it really stands out to me is because this, to me, is a simulationist, narrativist game. There is very little game here. I don't know about you. I didn't see any. Like, when we talk about GNS, there was almost nothing in this game about a game. Everything was like diegetic, right? Like, it's all diegetic progression. The whole game is about simulating wizard. There's very little. There's a little bit of narrative element in terms of like hooks and flaws, which are there's a type of flaw we didn't get into called story flaws, which isn't like something that affects your character sheet. It's something that affects how the world is going to react to your character. So that's like a very narrative element. Confidence points are kind of a narrative element, but the game score of this is extreme. This is not a game. I mean, it's called a role-playing game, but it's not a game in the sense of like a board game or, something like that. There's nothing to Jenga here. There's no builds to make. Like the spell lists, you make them up. The virtues and flaws, you acquire them organically. The experience points are gained by studying in libraries, right? So it's very, very, very different than your traditional heroic fantasy style D&D Pathfinder game, which could be a good thing for you, or it could be an absolutely horrible thing for you. So I don't think you're wrong either way. The whole point of this channel, the whole point of Night's Last Call and these Discord and these live streams is to just give you that experience, and give you that exposure. No, Galdacat, Wild Sea is going to be next week. So next week I'm going to be streaming every day, the week of Christmas. And I'll probably be on Christmas Day evening, Monday night. I have promised that we will cover Wild Sea on one of them. I'm hopefully going to get this fine gentleman on to one of the streams as well. Ben is kind of off work too, and maybe we'll do I don't know what we'll talk about, Ben. We'll figure that out, but now it doesn't require Ben. We have we always have a lot to talk about, so it's totally fine. I've never covered Shadowrun. I don't think I will. It's not a genre, and it's not a system, quite frankly, that has ever really interested me. I'm sorry. Benjamin says, play this game for years and I love it for all of its problems. I just wish its ideas about troop-based play and seasonal advancement were the norm in other RPGs. And they're not, and I don't think that they should be, Benjamin, because, a lot of fantasy RPGs are about heroic fantasy adventure. This game is not about heroic fantasy adventure, and I'm okay with that. And so different settings need different systems. And so if you want a game about heroic fantasy adventure, I wouldn't want these kind of rules in play. So no problem, Don Pokey. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. So I think that is going to do it for me. I don't have to go right away, but look, what does it say that I can get? I had 92 people in here with this topic, with this thumbnail. Okay. Look, integrity overall. All right. This by the way, this stream, I mean, it was voted on by my patrons, and ultimately I service them. But it was perfect because everybody else is out there making, making videos about, the AI art scandal or the Joe Cat thing. And they're trying to gather up the hype. I'm over here talking about a 20-year-old, well, really, honestly, like more like a 35-year-old game. Yes, we do have people watching. You're in Panama? That's sick. Merry Christmas to you. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. I will probably see you all Christmas Day. Oh yeah, that's the other one that Ben, yes. How could I forget? Everybody is just roasting Candela Obscura. Ben, I almost want to do one and just, praise how awesome it is just to be a troll. One weird trick to improve magic in your game. Actually, you know what? Let me find it real quick. So, Aaron, Mr. Smith from our channel asked ChatGPT to create a script for a YouTube for a YouTube video for this topic. And so he put it in there, and let me see if I can find it. And he says, I want it to be like 5 minutes, long or whatever. Where is it? I don't know where he put it. Damn. We have so many conversations in our games. He had to have put it in here somewhere. Let's see. This is where they were talking about. Well, here we go. Hey gamers, welcome back to our channel. But before we dive into today's fantastic content, let me give you a shout out to our new awesome sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Seriously, folks, if you haven't checked it out, Raid is an epic RPG game that will totally blow your mind. The graphics are insanely cool, and the gameplay, oh man, it's addictive. You don't want to miss out on this one, trust me. All right, now let's get back to the heart of today's video. We're diving into the magical world of Ars Magica. Cue sound effects. Ars Magica, folks, is like the ultimate spellbinding experience that's got every wizard and sorcerer buzzing right now. I mean, who wouldn't be hyped about a game that lets you cast spells, brew potions, or summon mystical creatures? It's like Hogwarts meets open world adventure, and it's insane. Now, let's break it down, folks. The customization in Ars Magica is off the charts. You can create your own mage from scratch, pick your own robes, magical staff, even your favorite spells. And guess what? The spells are so diverse. Fireballs, teleportation, levitation, you name it, this game's got it. Showing other game features. And check this out, folks. The graphics are next level. The world is stunningly detailed, filled with magical creatures, ancient ruins, and breathtaking landscapes. You're really going to feel like you're in the middle of a magical, mystical realm of Mythic Europe. Oh, and did I mention the multiplayer? Ars Magica lets you team up with your friends to create magical alliances and take on epic quests together. It's all about that camaraderie, am I right? All right, let me give you my 2 cents. Ars Magica, it's a game changer. It's got the wow factor that'll keep you hooked for hours. The spells, the graphics, the world building. It's a magical concatenation of everything that you'd want from a game. Well, that's a wrap for today, guys and gals. Don't forget to hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you won't miss any of our magical content. And hey, until next time, keep gaming and stay magical. See you, folks. So that was ChatGPT. That was ChatGPT's version of this video. Oh, I thought that was so good. Oh. God damn, this is so frustratingly compelling. Um, that is, you should be ashamed of yourself. That's what you should be. You should be ashamed of yourself. That is that is not a badge of honor. Let's see here. Then make an outrage react about KLC selling out. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think he just did. Yeah, the graphics are awesome. ChatGPT is like, what's a role-playing game? This has got to be a video game, right? Was that an average YouTube short? I thought I was watching a goddamn live stream. Hope you enjoyed Panama. I saw those graphics you showed earlier. Awesome. Yeah, that would get 200K views. Thank you, Federico. And then with an ASMR segment hyping the vote. Yes, of course. Yes. Oh, that's true. That's Mark. That's so good. I thought the game sucked. I mean, until that last part. Now I'm hyped. Oh, why? You know, it's anyway. My point is, look, here's all my point is, because this goes back to what Steven was making fun of me for my boring topic and my boring thumbnail. The fact of the matter is, we could destroy this game if we wanted to. Okay, I could get out there and I could make the 8-minute videos that, you know, hype up whatever, you know, controversy or drama, things like that. And I get it. For some people, especially people, this is their full-time job, or hell, some people are literally supporting other people's full-time jobs. You gotta play that game. But I'm just saying, we choose not to. But it's not because we can't. Okay, it's because we choose not to. All right. If I wanted to get in the game, I think we could crush it. Okay, let me just say that. All right. You came into my stream talking shit on my thumbnail. Yes.
Lazarus Stark tipped $5. Is this where I buy skins for Raid Shadow Legends?
It is.
Take 5.
Yeah. Go ahead and use our discount code KOLC20 to get 20% off this month's holiday Raid Shadow Legends skin package. You'll get just some incredible. We've got Elf on a Shelf. There's a whole collection of poppets. KOLC20, folks. Thank you. Don't use that. That's not. I don't even know if Raid Shadow Legends even has those things. I know nothing about the game. Literally, I've never seen it. Every time that comes up, I just auto skip. Roll for Combat confirming in this time of holiday spirit that they have no soul. Look, soul is a liability when you're trying to, you know, run a company. I mean, you know, you're trying to get it done. He's being facetious. Steven's actually probably one of the most genuine people that I've actually had the opportunity to meet while being sort of in this industry. Not that I'm in the industry, but from the people that I've met. In fact, actually, there was a great quote today. It made our top messages for the day from our Discord. Somebody said, one of our Discord members on Functional Report said, I got to admit, as someone who doesn't like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Roll for Combat puts out a good product. And then Smith from Night's Last Call said, Roll for Combat Pathfinder 2nd Edition is better Pathfinder 2nd Edition than Pathfinder 2nd Edition is. And so, you know, again, I respect Steven. I really respect Mark. So, oh, that would be such a clapback. What Roll for Combat isn't telling you about insert obscure game. They'd be too afraid to make this video. Look, even you may sometimes go with the hot takes, but you know what? Your work speaks for itself. So at the end of the day, at least you have that to fall back on for purposes of integrity. So there's that. But anyways, so yeah, that was kind of the fun wrap up. I was going to say, I'm going to be back next week. I'm going to be back Monday night. Christmas night isn't even really a holiday for most people. At least it's never been for me. We've always been sort of like a Christmas morning and we're done type family. So I'm going to be streaming next week. So that means I won't see you until you've had your Christmas, if you celebrate. I'm not sure what other holidays may be going on. I know Hanukkah, I think, is wrapped up. But you know, if you celebrate or whether you do or don't celebrate, I hope you have some great times with your families, your friends, your loved ones. And if maybe you're maybe you're deployed overseas, maybe you're stuck in some shitty situation, maybe come spend next week with us, because I'm going to be trying to stream a bunch so we can all hang out together. So either way, I hope you have a safe and blessed holiday. I hope that you enjoy your time, or if you hate your family and you've burned all the bridges with them, good for you, and enjoy your freedom and enjoy your peace of mind. Either way, I hope you stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time very soon on Knights of Last Call. Have a safe and happy Christmas, everybody. See ya.